Cool. Hi, everyone. Hi. So I'm not going to talk too much, but I have some questions for you to kind of think about and call on folks for a minute. And then we'll take a break, and then you'll come back and do some group work with each other around this stuff. So thank you for the introduction, Katrina. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me. This is only my second or third time at Skyline College. I've done a little bit of work with the system over the last 5 or 6 years, and so you know, we have 113 colleges, and I don't know anybody that's been to all of them, but I've been able to work with about 25 of them over the past 5 years or so, and Skyline is one of the nicest campuses. I like it. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm a Bay Area guy, so maybe I'm just biased. But so I'm going to talk a little bit about culturally relevant pedagogy. I think that in academia, part of our role in higher education is to codify and categorize, label various dynamics that already exist in very normal human relationships and everyday phenomena. And I'm in the field of education in particular. And I find that really to be the case in our discipline, right? That education, the dynamic of teaching and learning is something that's kind of instinctive for folks, and it happens in both conscious human beings and in animals as well, as they teach their young to do various things. You know, badgers, I don't know if you know badgers, the actual animal, badgers, you know, they teach their young to use the bathroom in one area of their den. Right? So there's certain things that, you know, you're kind of born with as a badger, but like where the bathroom is, like your mama badger has to like show you where the bathroom is, right? And so, I mean, that's not probably the best example. It's probably like a bald eagle example of something. But when we think about teaching and learning, it's a phenomenon of thinking beings at maybe the most complex levels of consciousness and maybe not so much. So in education, we find ourselves backtracking and labeling these various phenomena for the purposes of improving our practice. Culturally relevant pedagogy kind of is situated in that kind of framework of that there's been something over time that perhaps has impacted or intervened upon what we might naturally feel is the right way to do things, right? That could be our training as educators or lack thereof. It could be our bias as human beings as a socially unjust, in a socially unjust social order, a racist, sexist, homophobic, nativist nation could produce folks for educational purposes that don't really educate people very well, particularly if it's not training people to kind of purge those biased ideas out of them, right? So culturally relevant pedagogy as a notion is, as Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings would state, it's actually a pedagogy of opposition. It's very similar, as she says, to critical theory or critical pedagogy in this way, except for, quote, it really is committed to the idea of the collective empowerment, not simply the individual empowerment, all right? So we'll talk a little bit about what that is, and it should kind of feel a little kind of commonsensical to you, okay? So these are what we're trying to do today, learning outcomes. I usually don't use PowerPoint, so let me stop there. First of all, I don't use PowerPoints very often because I'm hyper. And when I use them, I feel like it's intervening upon my hyperness, and then it gets me all weirded out, right? I'm a Japanese anime fan and a comic book guy, and like I still watch anime to this day. Japanese was my foreign language in high school and college, and so I still have a vivid imagination, and sometimes slides kind of puts a box around it. But I actually created this presentation for a webinar that the Wiley Learning Institute asked me to do some years ago, and I actually never used it. So this is my first time actually using it, but of course it's probably like, I don't know, my 200th time discussing this issue. So we want to outline a rationale for applying this approach to your classes or your work. I realize that there's not only faculty in here, so we'll be talking about it in that way. Identify how to make cultural competence or critical consciousness meaningful to your students, and we'll get into that. Plan the extent to which you incorporate culturally relevant pedagogy into your class, just one topic or lesson, a whole unit, or the entire class. You'll be talking a little bit about that in the second half, right after the break. with each other, okay? And then you'll also be talking about, I don't know if we'll actually design activities, but we'll be working towards the design of activities that encourage students to use what they have learned beyond your class or space. Okay, so culturally relevant pedagogy, right? It's pretty much what it sounds like, all right? It's the idea of making the instructional experience that students may have, it's supposed to feel like it is deeply relevant to their lives and totally inclusive of their worldview and perspective, okay? She also wrote a book, Gloria Ladson-Billings, who kind of coined this term, actually coming behind Erickson and Mohat's idea of culturally responsive pedagogy. You don't have to, I don't want you to get bogged down in those distinctions, but pretty much it's coming out of this idea that you have a very one-dimensional form of how we teach students, right? That is very limited in scope in terms of perspective and worldview for the purposes of assimilation, right? Which is not odd or out of the ordinary, but the problem is when you're trying to acclimate someone to your society, but your society is incredibly diverse with a series of political and social perspectives and issues, it doesn't actually make sense to only educate them with one vantage point, right? So that you're learning a certain type of American history, right? I always talk about how you're learning all about the times when America won and all the times when you lost. Right? So if you're going to be a winner, you're going to be down with America, right? Because America's the winner. And then when we have a war that we don't do so well in, we say we didn't do so well there. Okay, but we didn't lose because we never lose, right? And the other piece is if you are from a marginalized population, either you were like protesting or causing trouble, but it's never constructed as a win, right? And with the diverse array of perspectives and people that we have in our society, you can't have an educational system that says that either you're mainstream and a winner or you're marginalized and a loser. Right? Because when challenges and boundaries, difficulties arise, okay, now you have to pull on the experience, right, of being a fighter, being targeted, right? What is the history of folks actually overcoming obstacles when they weren't part of the mainstream? And many of our students are actually not taught that in their education, right? So anyhow, Tyrone Howard summarizes it, actually quoting a few other theorists, that culturally relevant pedagogy uses the cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frames of reference, and performance styles of ethnically diverse students to make learning more relevant and effective for them. Okay? So we're looking at cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frames of reference, and performance styles. Okay? Now, Gloria Ladson-Billings wrote a book called But That's Just Good Teaching, and I love that title because really this is, in many ways, good teaching, all right? But the way we typically define good teaching in the United States is not necessarily this. Are you following this? Okay? So what we end up with is that good teaching becomes the way in which students, and you'll probably talk about this when you get your talk on critical pedagogy, and so these two are very intertwined. But good teaching is often defined when students can regurgitate the information that was given, all right? But regurgitation is not processing, right? The ability to regurgitate is not actually an indicator of cognitive ability, right? So we end up having this very narrow definition of good teaching that doesn't actually target the student's experience and build on the knowledge that they're actually bringing into the room. Does that make sense so far? Okay, cool. So the three tenets of culturally relevant pedagogy is, one, students must experience academic success. This is not a way of diverting from our agenda of getting students to achieve so that they can feel more engaged in the class. It's actually you're trying to do the engagement piece and the relevancy piece to improve their academic success. Does that make sense? Okay? So some folks say, I walked into a classroom I'm not going to say the city, but there's I do a lot of work with school districts, right? So I was at this school, and it was a social justice school. That's what they call themselves. And I'm a former principal of a school for social justice, right? So, I know what that's kind of supposed to look like, but I'm also highly critical of it, right? Because, you know, we got to do things a certain way, and we want students to succeed, and we want students to be safe. So anyhow, I was asked to do some work with this school. This is after I had left being principal. I go into this one class, and I know the guy. He's a nice guy. Yeah, he's kind of nice. Yeah, he's a nice guy. And so I go into the class, and we know each other a little bit. And when I walk into the room, there's Tupac playing in the background. You know, like, you know, I think it was one of his more positive songs, you know, because, you know, Tupac, you know, he represented kind of the dichotomy of the American experience, right? A little bit of hostility and violence and sexism, and then, hey, everything should be good, love each other, you know what I mean? So you had that kind of mix. But they were playing something, right? Tupac is a rapper if you don't know, but you should know. But anyway, so they're playing that. And so I'm waiting for him to turn it off, right? Because maybe it's how people walk into the classroom, you know, Tupac playing that. But it doesn't turn off. So he starts teaching. And Tupac, it's not like, right? It's, right? And he's, all right, y'all, to open your books. Right? And he's, right? And the students are like taking out their stuff, and one cat's on the cell phone in the back, another cat has his headphones on, and he's like, all right, y'all, so we about to do you know, we gotta get ready for the assignment, and kids, and I can't, Pac is still in my ear, right? And so, I'm sorry, I didn't warn you. So, I'm from Oakland, okay? Born and raised in Oakland, old school family, parents came out in the Great Migration, right? Very black and proud community, very black and proud city, that really the culture as I grew up was very much about cross-cultural solidarity and working class ethics, right? So my idea of blackness is one of great confidence in our history as a people of resistance, great pride in our history of cross-cultural solidarity. And so I'll flip between a black vernacular and like more proper academic language throughout this talk. So if there's things I say, just be like, I don't know what that meant, right? So anyhow, just wanted to tell you that, right? Because when I teach my graduate students, I say like cats, man. Some of these cats out here, and then so one of my students from Chile leans over to one of the other students and goes, why does he keep talking about pets? Right? And so I had to explain, oh, cats is a slang term for people. He's like, oh, okay, right? Because he's like, he keeps talking about pets. Like, what's his obsession with kittens? Okay, so anyhow, so I'm in this class and Pac is playing, and so I left the class and went to talk to the principal about some other stuff. I said, I'm gonna go back and talk to the teacher. I go back and talk to the guy, and he goes, hey, D, how'd you like my class? I said, you never turned off Pac. Why is that? I'm curious. Oh man, well, you know, it's culturally relevant, you know what I mean? The kids recognize it, it keeps them engaged, keeps them really feeling the class and the vibe, you know? I said, no, I don't. Can you re-explain to me? I'm just trying to understand. He said, well, because, you know, it keeps them calm, you know, they like feel relaxed. And so the problem with that, there's several, okay, right? I mean, there's several problems, right? Because if music was as loud as he is what I'm saying. Okay, so that's one problem. Secondly, you're not actually preparing them for academic success. There is no test for a job, for college, on the street, right? In which they'll be playing music at volume 10 while you're experiencing that test. Okay, if somebody wants to pocket check you and take your money, they're not gonna do it to a soundtrack. Okay, if you go in to take the SAT, no one's going to give you that to a soundtrack. So it's not preparing them. Are y'all following this? Yeah. Okay, and so I had a lot of difficulty with it. And two, of course, the calm issue, because I was like, we're not here to soothe the savage beast. Okay, that's not what culturally relevant pedagogy is, right? To keep them calm, right? If you want to do something with music, have them actually focus on the music, critique the music, the relevance of the music, etc. But don't just play it in the background like elevator music so loud that they can't hear you. I don't know what that was. He doesn't like me, by the way. That teacher, after that, he didn't like me. He was like, I thought Darrick was cool. And I was like, I'm not. I'm a nerd, actually. But anyhow, so number two, students must develop and or maintain cultural competence. This is really important, right? I've had educators ask me, does that mean I need to become an expert on the history and the culture of Filipinos? Does that mean I need to be an expert on all Latino history, right? No. But this second piece does require a little known element to teachers. It's called studying. And that's a joke, because teachers know studying, okay? Studying, right? A lot of our educators, particularly at the K-12, but at other levels as well, higher ed, don't even get me started. Higher education, we're a mess, okay? Community college is like the one place where you'll find people that are really trying to focus on teaching. But once you leave the community college, it's like, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, I mean, I'm writing a book, you know what I mean? And you're like, dude, but your students, they'll get over it, right? So this requires a certain level of study and inquiry on behalf of the educator and their institution, okay? For administrators, for faculty leaders, for deans, for department chairs, time has to be carved out for study and reflection on the actual demographic of your population, okay? In order to be relevant, we have to understand what are the relevant things impacting our students. Right? What are the relevant issues in the history of those students' struggles or their families or their community, right? And even if they don't know, you should, okay? And I don't mean you have to know the whole, but you have to know something. Are you following this? Because you're trying to connect your work, right, to what they want to know or need to know, right? You're trying to connect your discipline to real life. Yes? And so as we design what it is that we're doing, we have to find what about our discipline, right, could be used to address real issues in real life. And it brings it all alive. Again, I don't think it's anything you don't know. I'm just affirming it for some of you, affirming it for most of you, teaching some of you. Okay, so 3, students must develop a critical consciousness through which they challenge the status quo of the current social order. Okay, again, this can be really radical to people, okay? But if I am in a particular social location as a human being in which I have experienced some form of social, political, or economic targeting, whether it's poverty, whether it's incarceration, whether it's harassment over immigration issues, whether it's harassment in the street as a normalized sense of harassment through sexism or homophobia, or whatever it may be, okay? Dig this. The one thing that is going to definitely get me to concentrate is if you have answers to that. Okay? And if those things are normalized in our society, you providing me answers is actually equipping me to challenge the status quo. Does that make sense? Okay? So it's not necessarily I'm going to come into class and I'm going to try to radicalize the class and turn them against the U.S. government. You can, but that's not necessarily what she's recommending here, okay? And I don't tell folks that's what you have to do. What you have to do is understand the normalized circumstances in which students have been socially located, and then find a way in which your discipline can provide answers and clarity to those phenomena. Okay? I always have science teachers asking me, well, you're asking me to make science culturally relevant. Are you kidding me? Of course I am. All right? I mean, what's going on? I mean, hello, environmental racism. Why is all the asthma in like 5 locations in the entire Bay Area? Like, you know, why is asthma so high there? Why is cancer so high in particular areas? What do stressors have to do with poor health, right? Oh my goodness, science could go on forever and ever. You could go back to people being tested on of all different marginalized groups around the world, whether it's nuclear testing in the Pacific, whether it's medical testing here in the U.S. South, whether it's, you know, whatever it is, science is the perfect location to talk about cultural relevance. Mathematics, it drives me nuts when math teachers are like, we can't do it in math. Are you kidding me? Especially in the Bay of all places. Have students calculate what's going on with the housing crisis, right? Who got adjustable rate mortgages? Why are African Americans 3 times less likely to qualify for a mortgage with the exact same qualifications as a white applicant in the United States? Oh my goodness. The numbers, right? So there's all these opportunities to do this because what you're just trying to do is show students, clarify the matrix. Sorry, sci-fi reference. You're trying to show them the structure of an oppressive or a stratified society through your discipline. It's one of the most beautiful aspects of teaching. And even if you're not a teacher, you want to ask yourself, how is our program? How is my interactions with students, faculty, other administrators? What are we doing here to encourage a state of being that is humanizing for the people at Skyline College, rather than affirming the normalized, dehumanizing effects that they experience throughout the day? And this is what that might look like, right? The questions of how do we challenge or support ideas of elitism, right? How do we prioritize certain disciplines over others? Are transfer students more valuable than CTE students, right? Are students in the developmental sequence somehow less intelligent than students that are transfer ready? These are things we have to critique in our discussions and be vigilant about when they are kind of slid into the conversation somehow. Yes? Okay. And then, of course, lastly on this issue of developing a critical consciousness, right? Are we a space where it's good enough to simply welcome folks, and I don't believe you are, or are you a space that is in allyship with your students? Will you defend them? What is the institution willing to risk for them? Okay? So it becomes this greater question of being in opposition to these larger oppressive dynamics. Okay, does any of that make sense? Okay, cool. So I like to talk about it in this way because to me it can tend to help folks a bit. I don't think I go through it forever. Yeah, that's good. Okay, it won't be forever. Are you guys okay? Okay, I'm gonna be, I gotta go quick, you know what I mean? Because it's like, it's like, oh my goodness. Okay, so we want to remember this, and this is kind of leaning in again into critical pedagogy, right? So one, I talked about study, right? And so one of the first elements I encourage folks to think about is the idea of reflection. Praxis, P-R-A-X-I-S, right? Who knows what that means? Can you tell just your idea?
Active reflection and implementation based on your reflection.
Yes. Yes. No, very good, young Jedi. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, right? Praxis is about reflecting and acting and then reflecting, right? It's like this, you reflect, right? And then you act, right? And then you reflect on what happened. Yes? So that's praxis, P-R-A-X-I-S, right? And so it's critical because as we're doing this work, we're trying to get feedback from students. We're trying to read the room, right? We're trying to read our colleagues. We're trying to see what actually happened. We're trying to take feedback and make changes, yes? It's something that's ever evolving, right? So reflection is essential because one of the first things we want to do when we do anything culturally relevant is reflect on ourselves. Right? Right? And this is really important because when you can reflect on yourself first, like what is my history, right? Why am I in this discipline? Right? I love when educators, particularly at the community college, they do it a lot. I love when educators start the semester by telling students why the heck they're teaching that topic. No, really why, right? I taught sociology at Laney and De Anza College, right? And I would start each semester with, I'm in sociology because I'm black and I'm from Oakland and I lost 3 friends to homicide before I was 21 and my city averages, at the time, it averaged about 100 homicides a year since 1983, okay? Alameda, that little island city right next to it, has had 2 homicides since 1970. Piedmont has had 1 since 1970. And Piedmont, the boundaries of the city of Piedmont is inside the boundaries of the city of Oakland. And so that used to always make me wonder, how do we get 100 homicides? Alameda is right there. I don't even remember when they had one, okay? They had their last one like 3 years ago, so I think that's 2 in like since 1960 or something, like 2, okay? Oakland has like 100, right? And so that's why I'm in sociology. I wanted an answer to that. I wanted to find out why that is. That's why I started pursuing that, okay? Now, for me, getting into that field was all about its ability to be able to share with me why things are the way they are, okay? Thus, I will be teaching this class to hopefully help you explain why things are the way they are for you. That's how I would start my sociology semester, right? So now, it's all an exercise of you telling me, hey, you know, Dr. Smith, you know, I'm wondering, this has a lot to do with what went down in my country, but in my country it's a little different. Oh, really? Tell me how. Well, in my country, it's not really a lot of people killing each other like that because we don't have access to guns, but there's been a lot of death because we have, you know, paramilitary, like law enforcement, the death squads. Whoa, wow, that's heavy. Do you feel comfortable sharing that with the class? Yeah, man, I could talk a little bit about it. Cool, because then we'll be able to link that to the role, the way in which law enforcement plays as a domestic military force here in the United States, and link it back to your country as well and see it as a global phenomenon. Yeah? Okay? So now everybody's into that story. The student gets to share, right? Folks are like, wow, and then we could talk, oh, and all that's, you know, it's in Soc, but Soc is kind of easy for cultural relevance. You know, it's like, it's about society, so, you know. All right, so social cultural relevance, right? I talked a little bit about that because that's the point of the theory. Complexity, okay? So we want to be reflecting on our practice, reflect on who we are. We want to be able to attach it to what students are experiencing, but we want to make sure we maintain a level of complexity and depth. See? Because lives are complex. History is complex, and it's deep. So there's no need to make our instruction shallow just for the sake of being relevant. It's the complexity that often makes it real. Yeah? I'm sorry, I get all hyper. So you see what I'm seeing? The hyperness, right? It's our complexity that makes it real. Like, yo, some people drink Coca-Cola. They love Coca-Cola. Well, Coca-Cola is an international brand. Yeah, and they donate tons of money. They're a philanthropic corporation. They donate tons of money. But they've also been taken to international court, in the United States court, for assassinating union leaders in Latin America. Yeah, in Colombia. Wow, well, what do we do with that? Yeah, that's complex, isn't it? Whoa, but I love Coke. Yeah, you do, right? So what does that mean? Oh, right? Or if you're a science person, right? Like Coca-Cola used to have cocaine in it. It did, it really did. Cocaine wasn't such a bad thing till the early 1900s, right? And folks started saying that black dock workers were going crazy because they were using cocaine, and all the racial fear in 1905 around black people having cocaine in the system and going around and robbing and raping people. And then they wanted to get hard on cocaine, and Coca-Cola took cocaine out of Coca-Cola. Wow, so Coca-Cola was like, they was drugging people? Well, no, not really, because the definition of what is legal and illegal changes over time. See, complexity is real, yes? You have to be like, yeah, like weed? Yeah, like weed. It changes over time, right? Exactly, like weed, right? So you can have these dialogues and then go deeper, right? Chemical compositions, alterations to the biochemical or physiology of the body, right? Changes in brain reaction. Oh, right? All right. So complexity and depth, right? So complexity is the amount of components that might be associated with one particular phenomenon. But depth is like the level of depth of the layers, right? Of how deep it may go, right? From this idea of maybe a global economic dynamic all the way down to emotional interrelational dynamic. Yeah? So we can go multiple different fragments of the issue and go deep from macro all the way down to interpersonal, okay? And we do these for these issues. It's really difficult for a student to be disconnected, right? Because if I don't care about what's happening in Malaysia around this issue, I might care how it parallels to what's happening in South San Francisco. Right? So even if you hit the Malaysia and come back to South San Francisco, by the time you get to South San Francisco and then talk about how it's impacted my family or my community, I'm in. Okay, all right. And then transferability, right? We're not looking for generalization so that every single student is going to love my class. The idea is that we're trying to get students to imagine how what is being taught, how it relates to them. Some students you might miss, most students you won't. Does that make sense? Okay, all right. All right. last couple of things here. Well, I don't know how, okay, so classroom culture, right? We want to have these things down. And by the way, you'll get all these slides. Yeah. I'm going to send them to Katrina. Oh, my goodness gracious, right? It's like you're writing a book there. That's nice. That's awesome. Okay, so yeah, I'll send because, it's a lot of writing. You know what I mean? I get it. And you already do a lot of writing, I'm sure. So classroom culture. One, we still want to prioritize safety, classroom safety, right? So again, when that student might come up to me and say, hey, in my country, it's this, all right? I still have to check with that student to see if that's something that they want to discuss. Does that make sense? Because they brought it to me. Does that make sense? Okay. The other piece is in certain community college classes, just like everywhere else, it's not just community college, you'll see like disruptive students and people on their cell phone. And I don't know if you guys have that at Skyline. But yeah, probably not at Skyline. But I was at a conference that I won't name. It's a very popular community college conference in the state, but I will not name it, okay? And a person had gotten an award for like teacher of the year, faculty of the year or something. And they had a little sash, which is pretty cool. They had the sash. And so I saw them get the award and everything, and I was like, oh, that's cool, they got it, that's pretty awesome. And I have social anxiety, so like when there's like a crowd, like I'm somewhere else, right? As soon as I see the crowd, I go the other way, right? Which is really bad for like Bay Area eating in restaurants, because as soon as I go and there's a line, I just drive away. I can't do it, right? So I leave the room because everybody's in there, so I'm gonna leave. So I just leave, right? And then so after that little ceremony, it just so happens that she comes and she sits in the lobby right near me, just minding her business, looking through her stuff, whatever. And she said, have I seen you before? I said, nah, I'm doing this workshop. She's like, oh, okay, you look familiar. I said, I don't know, I know I'm not familiar, so, I'll be doing the session in there, right? She says, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll stop in. I said, sure. So I was doing a session at this conference on something similar to this, but it's more around race and equity in community colleges. Before the community college started talking about equity, right? This was before that, right? So she came into that with her sash on still, which is pretty cool, because I think I would wear the sash the whole conference too. You know what I mean? And walk around with my sash, right? And so she comes in, and then she kind of leaves a little early, and then so after the session, I'm walking out, and she walks up, she goes, that was an interesting thing that you did in there. I said, oh, thanks, whatever, that's really nice. She goes, can I ask you a question? I said, sure, Miss Faculty of the Year, anything. And she goes, I have some students in my class. They're really disruptive, loud, always on their cell phone, and I don't know what to do. And she's rocking the Faculty of the Year sash, right? And I'm like, yeah, well, that makes sense. She said, well, I'm kind of embarrassed about it. I said, no need to be embarrassed, right? We're an educational system. The California Community College is an educational system that hires people for the purposes of teaching and spends almost zero time on teaching. It's the greatest oxymoron of our higher ed system. The one place that hires people specifically to teach doesn't really give them a lot of time to learn how, right? So I said, that makes a lot of sense. And so one of the things I told her, I said, well, see, I know you're interested in the content, but most people in the United States, and as you've heard about the trauma narrative, like everybody has trauma, like, people talk about some students experience a lot of trauma. Well, actually, that's not accurate. 70% of Americans have experienced a traumatic event or some form of some acute childhood experience, adverse childhood experience, right? 70%. So that's most Americans, right? So when you're dealing with, we're a violent society. Right? We're a pretty violent place. Like, we'll just kill 15,000 people to gun violence in a year like it's nothing, right? You go to a country like Japan, they struggle to get over 50, and we're just blowing fools away here all the time. So we're a violent place. So when you're dealing with people that are coming in your classroom has to be safe first. Safety is first. And what does that look like? What are the boundaries of this class? How do we ask questions? Do we raise hands in here or what, right? What happens when I skip you? Whenever I skip you all, I see your hand. It doesn't mean I don't want you to talk. It means I'm trying to get to somebody who hasn't spoken. So never feel disrespected if I don't call on you immediately, okay? I'm trying to get to it. It means clarity. It means consistency, right? It means being an authority in the room that is responsible for people, not authority in the room that's here to dominate people, okay? So anyway, So then it looks like inclusive participation, right? Inclusive participation, we want everybody to be able to participate. Clear purpose, again, we want to define what our class is for, not just for matriculation purposes, right? Me and Katie Hearn would talk about this. Katie Hearn, you know Katie Hearn, Myra Snell, California Acceleration Project. We used to talk about this when I worked for the system, right? Be like, look, the purpose of your class on paper might be to go to the next level, but that can't be the purpose of your class. Yeah, I'm coming here so I can go there, but please don't have me here for hours out of my life and the only purpose is to go to the next thing. Give me something, you know? And I know you have a purpose, so just tell them what the purpose is. Just tell them what the purpose is, yeah? Like, we want to move you to the next level of English or the next level of math, but in reality, I really want you to become more literate. We're a very rich country with 44 million illiterate adults. 44 million illiterate adults, okay? And I don't want you to be one of them. Whoa, dang, boom, I'm in, right? I wish it was that easy. It's never that easy, right? But almost, okay? Shared teaching and learning, right? That's a critical pedagogy idea, right? That the students are also teachers too, right? So you want to be able to give them a chance to teach you and the rest of the class. And be conscious of microaggressions. Do we know what microaggressions are? Raise your hand if you do. Cool. Raise your hand if you don't. Excellent. Beautiful. So microaggressions, what are they? Someone tell us. Yes, please.
Kind of like they can be like a backhanded compliment, like, oh, wow, you're pretty smart for a female. They're just like little insults that some people might think are a compliment, but they're really insulting. Like,
Yeah.
I'll touch your hair, oh, I didn't realize you were so smart.
Yeah.
Smart people love you, things like that.
Yeah, right? And there's some things, one day maybe I'll come back and do something on microaggressions if you'd like. I mean, I don't have to go anywhere, trust me. But yeah, it's an interesting concept. I mean, they're traditional forms of disrespect and dehumanization, right? And they're called microaggressions because the theorists that originally wrote it up in a clinical field were talking about the old-fashioned overt racism is now being replaced by covert forms of racism. And I disagree with that premise because, again, I'm black. So small acts of disrespect went hand in hand with the large ones forever, okay? And I don't actually remember when the original article was written, but last time I checked, we still have the big ones. So I was like, people are still getting strung up and shot and beaten and all these horrible things, and those what we've been doing forever. And then you also still have the smaller, in quotes, smaller stuff. So anyway, but be conscious of these small forms, or more subtle forms of racism, sexism, nativism, etc., right? And so we want to be mindful of those things. Okay, so I already talked about this a little bit, but why culturally relevant pedagogy? To build student engagement, to have them deeply invested actually in the course, and to give them a sense of agency, right? So that they're not just learning how to assimilate, they're actually learning how to transform their own lives, okay? Now this is an important piece here, and I talked about praxis already, so I don't have to get into that, but remember, culturally responsive pedagogy, relevant pedagogy, and I keep switching between the two, sorry. Culturally relevant pedagogy is not racially relevant or responsive, but inclusive of race, culture, and identity as important considerations when teaching and designing curriculum. It's not racially, right? My issue with that teacher in the room, he had black students, so he's playing Tupac. Well, he didn't have that many black students. He had a few black students, mostly Latino students, and he was like, this is their culture. But that's only one small element, one really small element of their culture. And the way that he was using that music was actually in direct contradiction to the culture, all right? If my mama come in the room to talk to me and I'm playing music, what's the first thing she thinks she's gonna tell me to do? What? What you gonna say? She's gonna turn down the music, right? And I'm just rocking out, and I didn't, right? I didn't wash the dishes, I didn't mow the lawn, I didn't do nothing. I'm just rocking out. My parents are gonna come in, open the door, and they're not gonna be like, hey, they're gonna be like, turn the damn music, turn the damn music. We're like, what? Right? You turn the music off, what? And don't me. All that, right? That's the first thing. right? So to say it's culturally relevant teaching, to have music playing while you're teaching something important is actually in direct contradiction. Right? It is very strange to me, okay? So we want to remember we can slide into this space of, I work with a college in the north, and I'm almost done here, but are you guys okay? Yeah. Okay. I work with a college up north. I can't name it, okay, because usually when I say something critical, I want to name it. When I celebrate it, I'll tell you the name, okay? It's actually a really cool college, and I actually really like it. Some of our community colleges, I think like this one, are doing some just really good stuff, right? And some of them have a very few resources, right? But anyhow, so I'm up north, and I was working with the president of this particular college and his administration, and then some of the deans and stuff, right? And their thing was, it was kind of on the heels of the Student Success Act, right? And when I worked with the Foundation for California Community Colleges, I was kind of annoying with people about like pushing this equity question, right? I was just pushing it. But anyhow, I was annoying enough, I guess, or likable, depending on who's saying it, for folks to ask me to continue that work. So I'm up north, and they're saying, you know, we're trying to get our Native American students more involved, you know, more engaged, right? And, you know, when you go to Northern California or the Inland Empire in Southern California, a lot of those campuses are right near Native American reservations, like literally 2 exits away, right? It's an amazing opportunity. And so I said, well, what are the things you have done so far to engage that community? And one person said, well, Darrick, it's a good thing that you asked, because we're very proud of our Multicultural Day. We brought in a Native American chief, and he did a great presentation. And I said, And they said, yeah, it was just awesome. I said, how many people, locals, were there? Well, not that many, but I really enjoyed it. And I said, but that's bringing in somebody for like a cultural presentation. I'm asking, what have you done to engage with the reservation over there? I mean, reservation Native Americans, I mean, arguably are some of the most oppressed individuals in the Western Hemisphere, okay, like period, right? The lifespan of a reservation-based Native American is 30 years less than the average American. It's an 1800s lifespan living on the, I mean, it's a really bad situation. And so this is a great opportunity for your college to be this space, right, where you empower, and you just have, I don't know who the chief was, but you have somebody come, and that's it, right? And what I talked with them about, and I'm not like a you suck person. I only say you suck to K-12. I don't say that to community college. You know, it's a whole, because, you know, K-12 is always like, you know, it's rough. It is rough. I don't get paid. That's true too, okay? But then there's an argument of like these kids, man, they come from such terrible backgrounds, and that's why they can't perform, and the trauma and the poverty. I'm like, why are you always putting it on them? You just said you don't get paid, and you overwork. Could it be y'all schools suck? I mean, that would make more sense to me, right? So anyhow, but I don't talk to college folks like that, because for I think a lot of people just kind of, well, in some ways they know that they suck, but they want to do, no, I'm serious, they want to do better, right? And there's not, I haven't experienced yet in the community colleges as much dialogue, okay, around how bad the communities suck. That's all. But point is that my point to her was that, politely, that you're sliding into this idea of trying to do racial matching. Okay, and it's not about racial matching, right? It's about investigating, right, what's going on here, right? People that occupy land that is worth billions of dollars and has minerals and resources extracted off of reservation land to support some of the world's most powerful corporations. And yet, through violation of treaties and agreements, those communities are not giving appropriate percentages of the profits from the extraction of those materials, leaving them in deep poverty. Okay? Your college should be on that. I mean, not yours, but yours too. But I was talking about theirs. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's not just about saying, oh, we had a chief come. It's saying, well, how much of the salmon harvest that's pulled off this land makes a ton of wealth, and for who? Okay, and what are the stages of that expropriation? And how can we integrate that to our curriculum here and build some more warriors? I thought they were going to never have me back at that college, right? Because I'm just like, rah, 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 rah. But they asked me to be there. I was the keynote to their commencement. Crazy, right? I was like, am I the first black, commencement speaker up here? Because I know you got, a few issues up here with race historically amongst the redwoods. Okay, so CRP is not just about what is taught, but how one teaches in a multicultural setting. Okay, so, and I think you guys get the point around that. I think you all get the point around that, right? It's about how you teach, how you listen, how you move, right? Assume that your authority is a given. Okay, even when students are rebelling against you, all right, it doesn't mean that they're acknowledging you have no authority. They're actually acknowledging you do. Okay, so when students are being disruptive, right, they're often testing the space, right? They're testing whether it's a safe space, testing whether or not you're paying attention, testing whether or not you have courage, testing whether or not you have insight. All those things are affirmations, right, of your role and your authority as an instructor. Okay, so how you deal with those things matters. Right? So some of my work with deans is in department chairs is you have to talk to your instructors about how they conduct themselves in the classroom. It's everything. How you respond to a question. How you respond to what you think is a dumb question. And even teachers say there are no stupid questions, but that's not how you really feel. Okay? We all feel like I just said that. I swear I just said, did you just ask me 2 seconds after I said it? And you just want to say, yeah, I just said that. That's what you want to say, right? But as a teacher, you go, yes, and then you repeat it, right? And the rest of the students are like, dude, you just said that. You know what I mean? Or I just heard her say that 5 minutes ago, right? But we need to be practiced and trained in this, right? Some of us have bad faces. I don't mean ugly. No judgment. I don't mean unattractive. That's not what I'm talking about. We have bad faces. Faces that people read, right? When I get intense, I get this look on my face. And some people are like, dang, he's angry, right? So in the beginning of the semester, I go over my faces with students, right? Because an angry black man in the United States can trigger a lot of things for people, right? The man part, the black part, yes? Can trigger things for people. I don't think it's right, but it is real, and I'm an instructor. Does that make sense? And I have power, yes? So I have to be mindful of that. But then there's also the targeted element of that. As a black man, people assume I don't know anything, right? I don't know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? And so I have to be mindful of what that means for me so I don't overreact when somebody says it, right? Just be cool. You know what that is. You know what it is, right? And I definitely hear about this, definitely from my colleagues, right, over gender. I mean, gender's huge. I mean, some people cannot hear someone who identifies as female speaking. They can't hear it. They refuse. And so they're in this class, and there's a woman, and but see, no. See, you're not taking into account, slow down. No. I know you're about to make a great point. But what I'd like for you to do is just raise your hand, and I'll call on you, and then say your point, right? Because if you just start with no, it creates kind of some instability in the class. You understand what I'm saying? So just, I hear you. It sounds like I'm waiting. I'm ready for the point. It's going to be a great point coming out of you. Just raise your hand and tell me, right? And I've seen people respond to female instructors. It's nuts, right? I mean, it's just nuts, right? I'm not supposed to say that as an educator. It's nuts. That's a bad thing to say. But it is nuts, right? It's so we have to be mindful of how we feel about these things, how we're going to respond to these things, yes, right? And practice, right? Practice, right? Because the how is everything. And the last thing I'll say on that is that the how is important because we're modeling, thank you, we're modeling for our students, right? How a person who has a particular viewpoint or education or particular identity, how we're supposed to handle certain situations. We're modeling, right? That's most of our instruction, right? It's the content, right? But it's how the content is delivered that students are also learning from. They're learning their value, the value of the space, what a learning space is supposed to feel like. They're learning all of that. Yeah? Yeah, okay, all right. So I got a few minutes, so we're almost done. So these are the types of things, and you'll get the slides so you can continue to have these and reflect on these in your sessions, and then when we come back, you're actually going to do 3 different questions. Are y'all following us? So I just want to go over these real quick, all right? So one of the things we want to be reflecting on is, one, what are the common demographics of my classroom or institution, okay? When I taught sociology, the bulk of my students at De Anza were nursing students. I had a bunch of nursing students, right? Most of my students were Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander. I only had like maybe 1 to 2 black students each semester, or a quarter, I think De Anza's on quarter, right? When I went to Laney in Oakland, half my class would be black, you know what I mean? The rest would be Asian, Latino, with like 2 white people, okay? So the way I'm teaching it, I have to know what do I usually get in this class in terms of identity? Is it mostly female, mostly male? Do I tend to have students that outwardly identify as LGBTQ? Like, what is it that I want to make sure that I include in my class this semester? It doesn't require a dramatic shift, right? It's just your examples. This whole time I've been with you, I've been using examples that tend to relate to teachers. Yes? Okay? So you're just thinking about, oh, I want to pull that in. I want to pull that in. Huh, I wonder what happened there. Right? It's so exciting. Okay, and then in the community you serve, what social issues white students face? We talked about this, health, et cetera. Okay? Now this is one of my favorites. What if I don't know? Okay, I talked about doing inquiry, investigation. Okay? Of course, recent news articles are always good, okay? But I like public welfare reports from local nonprofit and state county agencies, okay? Nonprofits and state and county agencies. If you review your county health reports, that are usually annual or semi-annual, review your county health reports, okay? And then if you're trying to explain what your class is about, sometimes you might want to bring in the data from your county's health reports and show them. They don't know their county health report. They have no idea, okay? But if you show them, when I worked with the College of Marin, right? I worked with the College of Marin, and I walk in, and the faculty, it was a great experience. Good folks over there, and there was a dialogue about how part of our struggle is that our students are coming in and they have these histories, of dealing with getting kicked out of school and poverty and drug use and et cetera. And they were talking about, and this was a discussion about equity in students of color. So they're saying our students are coming in, our students of color are struggling with these issues, right? So I showed them the county health report, showing them that actually in their county, which is common in adolescence, but in their county, in Marin County, the hard drug use and alcoholism rates are off the charts in the most privileged areas, okay? In Marin City, where Tupac used to live and stuff, their uses of hard drugs and alcoholism was dramatically lower than all the wealthy areas around it, okay? They also, in Marin County at the time, had the highest poverty gap, second only to West Virginia or something, in the United States. Okay? They had some of the richest people in the country right near the poorest people in the country, right? And I asked them, if you're from Marin County, if you're from this area, which category do you fit in? And most folks are like, well, I'm somewhere in the middle, et cetera. Okay, so if you're somewhere in the middle, that's awesome. So your ideology can be one that either seeks to assimilate with the wealthiest or the poorest. So which one do you have more exposure to? The ideology of the wealthy people in this county or the ideology of the poor people in the county? And they were like, wow, okay. So this was a reflection process, but it started with looking at the county health data, right? All right. News channels, academic journals, and research, if you can stand getting through them. And then community involvement, right? Getting into community spaces that can tell you about what's happening, right? Looking up local organizations you're curious about. Go in, tell me what's going on here, right? And of course, always provide opportunities for your students to share what's going on, Oh, it's beautiful. You can have a whole segment in your class, right? I used to call it the hot seat, right? And students could come up and sit in my chair, right, when I used to sit in chairs, and they could sit in my chair or stand where I am and say, okay, 5 minutes on who you are, where you're from, right? What's a big challenge that you have? Which one of your greatest successes, right? And so students could do that every session, maybe 2 or 3 students a session, just to make the place comfortable and stuff, but before you know it, you get an idea what the challenges are. Okay, all right, so, and I don't have a bunch of these, I think we're almost done. So we talked about this, you reflecting on yourself, yes? Yes? Who am I? How have I been impacted by my social location? How do I view my students? Where do I need to improve in terms of communicating, engaging in dialogue with my students? How might my identity impact how students receive me in the classroom or workspace? These are questions you have to constantly ask yourself. That's why I'm sending you the slides. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Already talked about this. Good job. Okay. Examples, historical and contemporary. Diversity of cultural references and the opportunity to explore the complexity and depth of cultural particularities, blah, blah, blah. Academic language. Okay. How does my discipline of study address these issues? You want to always think about that. Think about the power embedded in your discipline, tons of power in each of your disciplines, or your location as administrator or program director. Enormous power. Okay. I think most of this. Oh, yeah, this is my favorite. How might students use information, frameworks, or skills from your discipline to begin immediately addressing these issues in their lives? You want to think about the immediacy of the application of your information. I usually promise my students each class, there is nothing that we cover today that you won't be able to use today. Which means I had to deliver on that, which was nuts, right? But oh, it was so exciting, right? Because each day I would say, so not just what are our learning outcomes, what can you use today? Okay, talked about that. Okay, oh, this is good. I did it. Okay. I mean, no, I didn't do it, but I covered those, okay? So I think this should be the last one. Yeah, this is the last one. Okay, so personalization. How must one be? What can or must one do in their daily lives with this understanding in these tools, okay? This is what guides my curriculum design. When I was principal, this is what guided my leadership, okay? All right? How must one be, okay? Now, I told you some ideas of how to start the class, okay? This is my last idea, how to start the class, okay? How must one be to be in your discipline or space? Think of a dojo, right? Or like the International Winnipeg Ballet School. Okay, weird reference. Okay, write down the documentary Too Much, and then you'll see what I'm talking. TU Much. All right, it's about the International Winnipeg Ballet School, and I use it in my school discipline class because I want folks to be able to see how to do a warm yet demanding form of rigid discipline that supports students but demands the most out of them. It's a great example. But anyhow, how must one be in order to be a ballet dancer? There's a mind state. There's a way of being. How must one be in order to be an astrophysicist? Some would say just very nerdy, but there's ways of being, okay? And thus in your discipline, what does it mean to be a writer, to be a storyteller, to be a mathematician, to be an activist, to be a community member interested in empowerment of your community? You want to define what it means to be. And when I say be, right, this is a very humanizing idea, right? This is critical pedagogy, right? But we must be these things daily, right? So that it's part of who you are. So tell them what that is, right? If I'm going to be in science, I can't be the same in science as I would as a b-boy break dancer, okay? You can't break dance in a lab. Things will kill you in a lab. Breakdancing is not smart in a lab, okay? So those are dramatic differences, but there's a way of being a b-boy. There's a way. I guess that's the way, right? But there's a way of doing it, right? But when you're in the lab, there's a discipline. It's not about my power over you. It's about the dangerous chemicals in the items in here. There's a way of being a scientist, okay? A person who is a writer, who appreciates good literature, They have to think a particular way. They have to analyze the narrative as if it's coming out of someone's mouth. Someone is breathing this information, their story, their narrative. Picture them, imagine them, engage with them in this space. It sounds super corny, but this is the truth of education. It is not just a performance you give to reach the next level. It is about your development as a human being. So in our program, we have characteristics that we're trying to get into you. We have boundaries of how we treat each other, and we'll hold you accountable. In my class, we have boundaries of how we treat each other, but I have expectations or how you are to learn to be in order to be a member of this discipline. Oh my goodness, you tell folks that, plus why you're in the discipline, plus the social issues you plan to address, plus the fact that they get to bring their own issues into the room for the discipline. Oh, come on, come on. Who doesn't want that class? Everybody. Okay, all right, so there's some notes. Okay, anyway. So that's the presentation part. Was this helpful? Yes. Oh, that's good. Okay, so we're gonna take a break. Okay, so thank you for now, and we'll, thank you, that's nice. That's really nice.